Hey everybody, welcome to the video for week 5. Oh, we are getting so close to the end already. So I'm going to walk you through the procedures for the discussion 1 and 2 questions for this week. And since the assignment is really the same procedure as discussion 2, and I want you guys to get a little bit more independence, I'm not going to give you the assignment procedures, but again, that's just like discussion 2, so I have confidence that you can do it. So both discussion 1 and 2 use the same data set. It's this 14-6, and it has a training variable, a life stress variable, and a performance variable. And our description of what the different pieces are that participants were assigned to either a control group or one of the training groups, short or long. The short training group received an hour of training, the long received an hour of training every day for a week, and they learned various techniques for decreasing their stress levels. They were given a puzzle to put together in a stressful environment, and the amount of time it took to do that puzzle was controlled. So that's what we're going to be looking for here. And in the first discussion, we are just looking at the training and the performance variables. So what they want us to do is to be able to look at whether the none, short, or long training had a difference in performance. Now we could use a t-test if we only had 2 groups. Let's say there was just no training or some training, then we would do a t-test. But here we've got 3 groups. We've got no training, short training, and long training. So if we have 3 groups, we need to do an ANOVA. Now, because we just have one predictive variable, that's one independent variable, and one dependent variable, we're going to do a one-way ANOVA. So we go to Analyze, and we're comparing means. We're comparing the means of those 3 groups down to one-way ANOVA. And we've got our performance score as our dependent variable, and our factor is training. Now we want to remember, if you've read the instructor guidance, we want to look at something called a Tukey post hoc test. So we're going to click post hoc and click on Tukey here to get that. Now, as you know, we're going to look at this if we have significant results. If we don't have significant results, we're going to just ignore this. But since we have to say whether we want it here, we'll get it and then decide later whether we want to look at it or not. So that's the post hoc piece. And we can get descriptive statistics. If you check that box, they'll give you the means for each group, and that's helpful to have as well. Click Continue, then click OK. So you should get, again, those descriptives. So here's the mean for the none, the mean for the short, and the mean for the long. And we want to know if, based on our sample sizes and their mean and standard deviation, if it's likely that these groups are different in the population. So here's our ANOVA results. And here we have an F statistic instead of a T statistic. And of course, we're really interested in this significance number. You guys can look at that. Now that Tukey test, if we want to look at the Tukey test, let me just show you what these results look like. This is basically just a pair comparison of each pair of contrasts. So remember, we have 3 groups, and we want to know if we do find that there is some difference between them, we want to know which groups that difference is between. So then this test gives us that comparison. The no training group compared to the short training group, the no training group compared to the long training group. And what we're looking for is this asterisk. The asterisk, it means the mean difference is significant at the 0.05 level. So look where there's an asterisk. Okay, now we're going to compare short to none and short to long. And then the long basically will be a repeat. Long to none is the same as none to long, obviously, and long to short is the same as short to long. But this table is going to tell you where those differences were that were significant. So this is going to be the follow-up piece to that. All right, so that's discussion 1. Now discussion question number 2. Let's go back and see what that tells us. For discussion 2, we're doing a 2-way ANOVA. So remember, when we had a one-way, it was because we had one independent variable. When we have a 2-way, it's because we have 2 independent variables. So in this case, we have not only their training, but also we have different stress levels. So they were given a life stress test to determine their current level of stress, and that was either high or low. So we have two groups there, high stress and low stress. That's a category or a group. If this was a continuous variable, we would have to do a different test. We couldn't do an ANOVA, but we've just got high and low. So high and low stress, and then we also have the training just like we have, and the performance is the same as we had. So let's go back to our data. So to do a two-way ANOVA, we actually go someplace different. We go to General Linear Model, Univariate, and now we've got your performance is still your dependent variable, and your factors are going to be training and life stress. For the purposes of this class, you're never going to have to put anything in any of these boxes below here, so don't do that. Just keep them up with fixed factors. Now again, we're going to have that same post hoc test. So if one of these is significant, we're going to want to know where. So we can move them. I had already done this, but when you open this up, it'll look like this. So we've got training. If there's a difference in training, we'll want to know which groups. But let's think about life stress. There's only two levels of life stress. So if we find out that there's a significant difference in the means based on life stress, we're going to know where that difference is because there's only two levels. So we don't really need another test for life stress. So we can just do training, Tukey, because training has three levels. I'm going to get that Tukey, hit continue. Now the other thing that's helpful very often is to look at graphs. And I'm actually going to do this from the start. And so you can do a graph that shows you the means for each of these things and each of the groups. So what we'd really like to do would be to put training as the horizontal axis and life stress as separate lines. So, and this will make a lot more sense when you see what that output looks like. And you always have to click add and see it down here, otherwise it won't make that graph. Many times I've forgotten to click add and hit continue, and you'll get a pop-up error message. Just make sure you put add here and you'll get there. Click continue. Alright, and then under options, you don't need to move anything over, but do click descriptive statistics and estimates of effect size. That'll help you out. Continue. Click OK. Alright, so we've got our training and our life stress. Again, here's our descriptives now. We have a mean for no training high stress, no training low stress, short training high stress, short training low stress, all 6 groups. Now remember, in my instructor guidance and in your reading, we've talked about main effects and interactions. So what you see in the output, this group with the star here, this is your interaction. So you're training by life stress interaction. And here's whether that's significant or not. You've got your life stress main effect and your training main effect. But our interaction is significant. So one way to think about that and to try to understand what that means is to look down at that graph that you made. So here's that graph. So the interaction means that the results are different for one variable depending on what level of the other variable you're at. So if we just look at, if you are in a high stress condition, all of the training only has a little bit of an effect. You can see this slope is pretty low. If you are in a low stress condition, this training is pretty high, and the short training probably helps more than the no training, and the long training helps more than the short training. Now we actually have to do some more follow-up tests to figure out if this is in fact significant. We're not going to cover those in this class, but you can start to get a suggestion that the effects, because that interaction is significant, the effects of training are different depending on whether you have high life stress or low life stress. So we're not going to want to just summarize the effect of training. We're not just going to want to summarize the effect of stress on performance. We need to talk about them together. So the effect of training is different depending on which level of life stress you're at, and that's the definition of an interaction. So that's what you're going to need to talk about in your discussion. So again, I hope this is helpful, and as always, ask if you have questions.